Something unusual is happening right now, and most people have absolutely no idea. Across Mexico, millions of elderly citizens are about to make a choice that will either secure their financial future or leave them struggling. And the clock is ticking. We're talking about a deadline that's approaching faster than most people realize. And if you miss it, the consequences could echo through the rest of your life. At first glance, it seems like just another government program. But when you look closer, when you understand what's really at stake, the story becomes something much more urgent, much more personal. Because this isn't just about money, this is about dignity, independence, and whether seniors in Mexico will have the security they deserve in their final chapters. The name is simple, the new welfare card. But the implications are massive. And right now, as we're speaking, there are elderly men and women sitting at home, completely unaware that July 3rd is their deadline. Not July 4th, not July 10th, July 3rd. That means if you're watching this and someone you care about hasn't taken action yet, you might be running out of time. Here's what makes this situation so critical. This isn't a secret program. The government announced it. But somehow, despite all that, millions of seniors still don't know what's happening. They don't understand their options. They don't realize what they might lose. And honestly, that disconnect between official announcements and actual public awareness is where the real problem begins. Think about that for a moment. We live in an age of instant information, social media, news alerts, government websites, and yet there are still millions of people who could be profoundly affected by a deadline, and they're completely in the dark. Why is that? How does something this important slip through the cracks? The answer is more complicated than you might think. It's not just about communication failures, though those certainly exist. It's about systemic gaps. It's about vulnerable populations being overlooked. It's about the difference between an announcement and actual outreach. And it's about what happens when bureaucratic processes don't account for the real-world challenges that elderly people face every single day. So let's break this down. Let's understand what the new welfare card actually is, who it's for, what it means, and most importantly, what happens if you don't take action by July 3rd. The new welfare card, or Tarjeta Bienestar as it's known in Spanish, represents something significant in Mexico's approach to social support. It's designed specifically for elderly citizens, for people who've spent their entire lives contributing to society and who now deserve financial security and dignity in their final years. The card functions as a direct payment mechanism. Instead of navigating complicated bureaucratic systems, seniors receive their benefits directly, electronically, into an account they can access whenever they need it. Now, this might sound straightforward. It is, in theory. But the execution, the rollout, the way it's been communicated, that's where things get complicated. Because the government isn't simply handing out cards to everyone. There's a registration process. There are requirements. And there are deadlines. Lots of deadlines. The July 3rd deadline we're talking about isn't arbitrary. It's the cutoff date for elderly citizens to claim their welfare card or to transition from their previous payment method to this new system. After that date, there could be significant delays. There could be payment interruptions. There could be complications that take months to untangle. And here's where things get interesting. Many elderly people in Mexico still don't have access to the internet. They don't have smartphones. They don't watch YouTube. They don't read news websites. They get their information through television, through neighbors, through family members, or through government offices. That means relying on word of mouth, on local announcements, on community outreach. And as we all know, that system has massive gaps. Picture this, an elderly woman in a rural area, someone who's worked her entire life, who's finally eligible for government assistance in her golden years. She doesn't know about the deadline. She doesn't know about the card. She shows up to collect her payment on July 15th and suddenly, nothing's there. Her money hasn't arrived. She doesn't know why. She doesn't know what to do. Now she's stressed. Now she's confused. Now she's scrambling to figure out a system that should have been simple. That scenario is playing out right now, in real time, across Mexico. And what makes it worse is that it's entirely preventable. It's not a lack of resources. It's not a complex technical problem. It's a failure of communication. It's a gap between what the government intended and what's actually reaching people. But let's understand what the new welfare card actually provides, because knowing the benefits is crucial to understanding why this deadline matters so much. The card provides direct access to welfare payments. These aren't small amounts. For elderly citizens, we're talking about genuine financial support that can make the difference between struggle and stability. We're talking about money for food, for medicine, for rent, for basic necessities. For someone living on limited resources, for someone who might not have children or family support nearby, this money isn't supplemental, it's essential. The card also streamlines the entire process. Gone are the days of waiting in long government lines, of dealing with complicated forms, of trying to navigate a bureaucratic maze. With the card, payments are automatic. They arrive electronically. They're reliable. They're predictable. For elderly people, predictability matters enormously. It means they can budget, they can plan, they can have peace of mind. But here's what many people don't realize. The transition to this new system isn't automatic. Just because the government creates a new card doesn't mean everyone gets one by default. People need to register. They need to claim it. They need to complete the process. And if they don't do it by the deadline, they risk payment interruptions that could last weeks or even months. So we're back to the core problem. Millions of elderly Mexicans don't know this. They're not aware that action is required. They're not aware of the deadline. They're not aware of the process. And with each day that passes, more people find themselves on the wrong side of that July 3rd cutoff. Now, wait a second. Let's talk about who exactly needs to do this, because that's important too. Not every elderly person in Mexico needs to take action. The government has been trying to proactively enroll people, but that process has been inconsistent. Some regions have better outreach than others. Some communities have been reached more effectively than others. The elderly citizens who definitely need to take action are those currently receiving government assistance through older channels. If you're on a pension program, if you're receiving welfare payments, if you're benefiting from government social support in any form, then you likely need to claim your new welfare card. If you don't, your payments could stop. There are also elderly people who aren't yet receiving support, but who are eligible. Maybe they never registered for previous programs. Maybe they didn't know they qualified. Well, the new card system presents an opportunity. It's a fresh start. It's a chance to access support they might have been missing out on. But again, only if they know about it and take action by the deadline. And that's not all. The transition process itself has revealed something surprising about how different the implementation is across different states in Mexico. Some regions have handled it smoothly. Some regions have had significant problems. Some elderly people got their cards in the mail. Others need to go to an office to claim them. Some had their information transferred automatically. Others need to register from scratch. This inconsistency is a huge problem because it means that the same deadline affects people in radically different situations. Someone in one state might have everything they need to comply easily. Someone in another state might face bureaucratic roadblocks that make it nearly impossible. Let that sink in. The government created a unified deadline, but the implementation is fragmented. That's not a recipe for success. That's a recipe for confusion and people falling through the cracks. Think about an elderly man in Oaxaca. He got a letter about the new card 3 weeks ago, but he didn't understand it fully. The letter was official government language. It wasn't written for someone who might be struggling with reading or understanding bureaucratic processes. He set it aside. Now it's late June. He decides he should probably deal with it. He goes to the local government office. There's a line. There's always a line. The office is only open certain hours. He has health issues. He can't stand there for 3 hours. He comes back another day. But by then, the office is overwhelmed. People are being told to come back, to try again, to call a phone number. Now, he's a man in his 70s. He doesn't have a smartphone. He doesn't have email. He's now confused and frustrated. The deadline is looming, and he still doesn't have his card. This is happening right now, not as a hypothetical, as a reality, and it's being replicated thousands of times across Mexico. But here's the surprising part. Even with all these challenges, there is a path forward. There are things that elderly citizens can do. There are ways to navigate this system. It's not impossible. It's just that the information needs to reach them, and it needs to be clear. First, let's talk about how to actually claim the card. The most straightforward way is to visit your local government office, specifically, the office that handles social welfare in your municipality. You'll need identification, you'll need proof of eligibility, you'll need to register. It's a process, but it's doable. However, and this is crucial, you need to do this before July 3rd. After that date, things get complicated. Your previous payment method might not work anymore, funds might not arrive, and getting everything sorted out could take a very long time. For those with family support, here's an option. Bring a family member with you, someone who can help navigate the process, someone who can make phone calls if needed, someone who can help with paperwork. This is honestly one of the best strategies because it turns a potentially stressful, bureaucratic process into something manageable. For those without family nearby, many municipalities have community centers or senior centers that can help. These aren't always well publicized, but they exist. Elderly citizens can call information lines. They can ask neighbors. They can go to the town hall and ask where to get help with the welfare card process. Now let's talk about what happens if you miss the deadline. And this is important because it's not like the world ends, but things do get significantly more complicated. If you miss the July 3rd cutoff, your old payment method might discontinue. Your funds from the government might not arrive as expected. You'll then need to go through a process to claim your welfare card retroactively. You'll need to explain why you missed the deadline. You might need documentation. It's fixable, but it requires time and effort and patience and emotional energy. For someone living on those government payments, missing even 1 or 2 months of assistance is genuinely difficult. It's not just inconvenient, it's stressful. It might mean choosing between medicine and food. It might mean not being able to pay rent. The consequences, while not permanent, can be acute and painful. But that's not all. There's another layer to this story that makes the situation even more critical. The new welfare card represents something bigger than just a payment delivery system. It represents a shift in how the Mexican government is approaching social support for elderly citizens. It's part of a larger initiative, and understanding that context helps explain why the deadline is non-negotiable and why it matters so much. The government is trying to modernize its social welfare system. They want to move away from outdated payment methods. They want to reduce corruption. They want to ensure that money actually reaches the people it's intended for. These are good goals. These are noble goals. But the execution matters. And the execution depends on people knowing what's happening and taking action. What concerns many observers is that this transition has a real human cost if people aren't informed and supported properly. And that human cost is being borne by some of the most vulnerable members of society, elderly citizens who've done everything right, who've worked their whole lives, and who now deserve support with dignity and without stress. Here's where the story takes a surprising turn. While most of the focus has been on the problems, on the deadline, on the potential for people to slip through the cracks, there's actually been some really positive outreach happening in certain regions. Some municipalities have done an excellent job of reaching their elderly populations. They've sent volunteers to homes, they've held community events, they've made it easy and clear, and in those regions, the transition has been smooth. So the capacity to do this right exists. The infrastructure exists, the resources exist. What's been missing is consistency and universality. And that's fixable, but it requires awareness. It requires action at the local level. It requires community members, family members, social workers, and local leaders all pitching in to ensure that nobody falls through the cracks. This is actually something that each of us can do something about. If you have an elderly parent, a grandparent, a neighbor, anyone in your life who might be affected by this deadline, you have the power to help them navigate it. You can make phone calls. You can go to government offices with them. You can help them understand what they need to do. You can make sure they don't miss the deadline. And honestly, most people don't realize how much impact one person can have in this situation. A single phone call to the right government office can save someone months of bureaucratic headaches. A single visit to an office with a family member can mean the difference between someone getting their card and someone missing a deadline. These actions are simple. The impact is enormous. Think about your own elderly relatives for a moment. Do they know about this deadline? Have they claimed their card? Do they understand what the consequences of missing the deadline might be? If you don't know, maybe that's something worth checking on. Maybe that's something worth investigating. Because if the answer is no, then you've just identified something you can actually fix. Now let's talk about what the actual process looks like, because demystifying it is crucial. The steps are straightforward, though they can vary slightly depending on where you live. Step 1. Determine if you're eligible. You're generally eligible if you're over a certain age and you're currently receiving government welfare or pension payments. If you're not sure, you can check with your local government office or call the social welfare hotline in your state. Step 2. Gather your documentation. You'll need valid identification. A government-issued ID is best. You might need proof of address. You might need documents showing your current welfare status. Nothing exotic, nothing that most people don't already have. Step 3. Go to the appropriate government office. This is usually your local municipal office or a specific welfare office. This is where you actually claim your card. You fill out forms, you provide documentation, you complete registration. Step 4. Receive your card. In some places, you get it immediately. In others, it's mailed to you. Either way, once it's in your hands, you'll need to activate it. This might mean going to a bank or making a phone call. Step 5. Start receiving payments. Once your card is active, your government assistance starts flowing to your account directly. It's a process. It takes time and effort, but it's not complicated. The problem isn't complexity. The problem is that people don't know it's happening, don't know they need to do it, and don't know where to start. And here's something else that's worth mentioning. The government has set up ways to make this easier for people without family support. There are community workers in some regions. There are volunteer programs. There are information lines you can call. The resources exist. They're just not being utilized to their full potential because people don't know about them. But that's not all. The logistics of this transition reveal something important about digital divides and inequality in Mexico, because this entire process assumes a level of government capacity and infrastructure that simply doesn't exist uniformly across the country. In major cities, sure. In smaller towns and rural areas, things get much more complicated. Imagine an elderly person in a remote area of Guerrero or Chiapas. The nearest government office might be an hour away. They might not have reliable transportation. They might have health conditions that make travel difficult. And even if they can get there, the office might be overwhelmed. It might not have the staff or resources to process applications quickly. So someone might take 3 buses and spend an entire day trying to claim a card that should take an hour to process. This is the real-world challenge that the deadline creates. It's not just about bureaucracy, it's about access, it's about inequality, it's about the difference between living in a city and living in the countryside, and the July 3rd deadline doesn't account for any of that. Now, what's interesting is that the government is aware of these challenges. They've been trying to address them. In some states, they've set up mobile processing units. They've sent workers to rural areas. They've created alternative application methods. But again, this isn't happening uniformly everywhere. Some regions have adapted, some regions haven't. And then something unexpected happened. As the deadline approached, news stories started emerging about complications, about elderly people who'd already claimed their cards but weren't receiving payments, about payment delays, about technical glitches with the system. This added another layer of urgency and concern. The point isn't to suggest that the system is broken. It isn't. It's actually quite functional. The point is that any transition has growing pains, and when the transition affects vulnerable populations on a tight deadline, those growing pains have real consequences for real people. But that's not all. There's also a question about what happens after July 3rd. Is that truly the end, or is there some flexibility? The official answer is that July 3rd is the deadline. But we've also seen that bureaucratic systems, especially in developing countries, often have more flexibility than the official language suggests. There might be grace periods. There might be ways to claim the card after the deadline, but relying on that is risky. It's better to be safe and claim it before the deadline. Let's also talk about what makes this issue so personal and so urgent beyond just the financial mechanics. Because honestly, most people don't realize this. But for many elderly people in Mexico, this welfare card represents more than money. It represents recognition. It represents the government saying, "You matter. Your years of work and contribution matter. We're here to support you now that you've earned the right to rest." For someone who's spent their entire life working, maybe in jobs that didn't have formal pensions, maybe in informal economy work that wasn't tracked or counted, suddenly having a government-issued card, having an official welfare payment, having that official recognition, it means something. It's dignity, it's security. And the process of claiming that card, of going to an office and being processed and receiving something official, it affirms that dignity. So missing the deadline isn't just a financial problem, it's a personal problem. It's a disruption of something that was supposed to provide peace of mind and security. As we're looking at this situation in late June, with just days remaining until the July 3rd deadline, the reality is becoming clear. There are going to be people who miss it. Despite all the warnings, despite all the announcements, despite everything we've discussed, some elderly citizens will find themselves on the wrong side of that deadline. And those people are going to go through periods of confusion and stress and financial uncertainty that could have been avoided. But here's where hope comes in, because while that's likely, it's not inevitable. It's preventable. Every single person who takes action today, who claims their card before July 3rd, is avoiding that future stress. Every person who helps an elderly relative navigate this process is preventing a problem. And that has power. That has significance. That matters. The bigger picture here is that this situation reveals something about how social support systems work, about how government initiatives actually reach people, and about the gap between intention and implementation. It's a case study in what happens when a good idea meets an imperfect reality. And the lessons matter. They matter for how we think about social support going forward. They matter for how governments should communicate with vulnerable populations. They matter for how we build systems that actually serve the people they're intended to serve. If you take nothing else from this, understand this. There are millions of elderly Mexicans who deserve financial security and dignity in their later years. The government has created a system to provide that. But that system only works if people know about it and take action. And right now, that awareness is lacking. That action isn't happening universally. And the consequences could be profound for those who miss the deadline. So if you're watching this and you have an elderly person in your life who might be affected by this deadline, do something today. Make a phone call, send an email, visit them, help them navigate the process. Be the person who ensures they don't fall through the cracks, because that's the difference between a tragic outcome and a successful transition. It's personal action. It's human connection. It's people caring enough to help each other. And that's actually something beautiful. In a situation that's mostly bureaucratic and complicated and frustrating, there's still room for that, for people helping people, for communities coming together, for families making sure their elderly members are taken care of. Because in the end, this isn't really about a card or a deadline or government systems. It's about whether elderly people in Mexico receive the support and dignity they've earned. And that's something worth fighting for. That's something worth putting in the effort for. That's something that matters more than the logistics or the bureaucracy or the deadlines. July 3rd is coming. The deadline is real. But what happens after July 3rd depends on what happens right now, on the choices we make, on the actions we take, on whether we recognize the people in our lives who need help and whether we actually provide it. That's the story of the new welfare card. That's the real significance of the deadline. And that's why this mat,